Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Anthony Pantaleno and Barbara Edell Fisher are licensed psychologists who want to offer hope to parents and young people struggling as a result of a mental health crisis never seen before in the United States, brought on by a number of things, from the pandemic to financial struggles, isolation, dependence on social media. The name of their book, Best Therapy for Teens to 20-somethings, A Parent's Guide to Finding Mental Health Support. And clearly, there was plenty of motivation for this book.
It was during the pandemic that this first began. Tony had approached me about writing this book, and just like all psychologists, we were experiencing an unprecedented amount of calls from people who were looking for help for themselves, their parents, their kids, their friends, and having a really, really difficult time. And we really felt there was a need to help people in this process, in the search for finding the best fit therapist for them, so that it would be a successful endeavor, hopefully. And that's really how we started.
Is it still so difficult to find a therapist?
Yes and no. It has slowed down from the absolute feeding frenzy a year or two ago, but the problems still exist for many families in the sense of limited or sometimes no insurance coverage. The logistics of, many people want telehealth these days, which is understandable. We've kind of created the culture. But the same typical things, resistance from a young person not wanting to see a therapist, those things haven't really changed much. So there's probably a bit more availability now, and whether someone can line their benefits up with a good provider, is so that'll be the question forever.
Is this a book to use if you can't get a therapist, can't afford a therapist, your insurance doesn't cover it?
That's a good question. We sort of have the book divided into two parts.
Okay.
The first half is exactly what you're saying. It's a way to help parents to navigate the mental health care system, to understand the terms that are used, to understand how insurance works, to understand why people need to have a diagnosis. And we also try to reframe, in the first part of the book, the whole idea of mental health support, and to really normalize this, because we see it in terms of a mental health spectrum, right? That there are people who are just suffering with small everyday challenges that can benefit. There are people who have more complicated issues, but everybody can benefit from getting help if they're able to actually figure out how to do that. So the first half of the book is more of the nuts and bolts of that process.
Of navigating the healthcare system and finding somebody that's going to work for you.
Right, and understanding what some of the obstacles are and how you can deal with them. For example, a lot of times when trying to help young people to get on board with going to see a therapist, there may be some resistance, right? And that's very normal for young people to resist the idea at first. And so we approach it in a way of kind of leaning into finding out more about what's going on with them, what are their concerns, not forcing them into it because we know that's not going to work, but trying to help them find the motivation for how this could be helpful in their everyday life. Maybe going together with their child so that, they're not being targeted as the problem in the family. So there are just different ways that we talk about approaching the process.
Parents don't also know, we all the time come up with someone who's now ready, but they'll ask the question, well, I've heard about CBT. What's CBT? But I've also heard about DBT. What are all these different acronyms? And given the alphabet soup, how do I know which one might be the best for my child or my young adult? That's a tough question. Just once you've even got past the obstacles of insurance and getting your teen on board, it's where do we find, if you go into psychology today, for example, which is probably the biggest listing of mental health providers in the country, you'll see that people list their credentials, credentialed in blah, 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 blah. Well, what is that? So in the beginning, we thought it was important, if parents are going to read this and it's going to be practical and useful, give them a sort of a little bio of what each of these different treatments focus on, so that they're just not shooting in the dark or operating on blind trust. They can see what resonates with them, what given their particular situation, what might make the most intuitive sense.
Tell me what those two acronyms that you just mentioned, what do they mean?
So CBT is cognitive behavior therapy, which really came into being in the late 60s, early 70s. It followed what up until then was really the earlier types of psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, humanistic psychotherapy, it was called. And cognitive therapy focuses on the idea that your emotions and behavior are largely determined by how you think. So if you have very rigid, absolutistic thoughts, very catastrophic thoughts, that's going to take you down a road that's probably not going to be helpful to you. If a cognitive therapist can help soften those, loosen them, make them less rigid, your emotions and behavior, it's theorized, will then follow. Dialectical behavior therapy grew out of cognitive therapy, and dialectical behavior therapy took the position that we have to teach psychotherapy the way we would teach a college course. So it's basically kind of a boot camp in 5 different kinds of therapeutic skills. It also, different from with CBT, you work with an individual provider. In DBT, at least in traditional DBT, you work with 2 different providers. You have an individual therapist, and then you have a second therapist. The 2 therapists work together. The second therapist runs what's called a skills group. It's a small group. It's like a classroom experience. And so you have that group experience, which is known to be very therapeutic in itself, any type of group work. And you also have your individual therapist to deal with any issues that may be unique to you. And then out of DBT grew a third therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is probably the most current sort of, it's the word I'm looking for, not innovation, but the third outgrowth. Acceptance and commitment therapy now incorporates elements of the prior 2, but it really focuses on what values you hold as a person, what's important to you. And so the therapy is geared towards what's going to make your life a more valued life, a more meaningful life. So just those 3 little snippets, if I'm a parent and I'm starting, and I know, oh my God, my kid's going to freak out if they hear group therapy.
Yeah.
So those resonate differently, and it's a good starting point. So that's what we try to provide.
I have to ask, the issues with children the pressure on doing well in school, getting into college. They've always been there, wanting to be accepted. You're a teenager, you're a mess anyway, right? You're hormonally all over the place. It's difficult, But now with social media, how much does that play into some of the issues that we're facing right now?
I think that is really a major issue. And I think you described it very well. The issues that people face are in many ways the same as they always were, right? People always had to deal with wanting to fit in and loneliness and bullying and academic pressure, right? All of that. That's nothing new. But now it's even more stressful than before because people are exposed to this all day, all the time, because of social media and their devices and our known addiction to screens. So it's a very different situation than, kids years ago who had to deal with a lot of these troubling things at school, but then could come home from school and find refuge in being home. And now it just, it's 24/7. And unfortunately, many of us, including myself, we lead a very phone-centered life. Our phones are part of us, all day, all the time.
Yep.
So I really do think that, we have to acknowledge, and there is absolutely a relationship between excessive screen time and feelings of loneliness. As Tony mentioned, loneliness is probably the next, mental health crisis. I think that it's already been deemed a public health concern, but not just by our Surgeon General, but by the World Health Organization as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is, how are you reaching these parents who really need you?
The problem is that as therapists, we can only help people also who wind up in our offices.
Right.
Right. Or, telehealth. So it is challenging. And it's actually been kind of really interesting to see where different communities which we've connected with to try to get our information out there. So some of it has been presentations that we've done in bookstores, book talks, schools, connecting with PTA, other mental health professionals who might use this as a resource, mental health agencies, physicians. It just kind of goes on because really there are so many people involved in caring for our young people, educators, so that's been really a great experience with discussing the book, is just trying to reach out to different communities.
Well, I have no doubt that you will find your audience. Anthony Pantaleno and Barbara Edell Fisher. Best Therapy for Teens to 20-somethings, A Parent's Guide to Finding Mental Health Support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A series of tragic events led Theresa Foley to write her book that not only helped her to deal with suicidal thoughts, she hopes it'll help others. The name of her book, Made a Horrible Mistake. Now, Theresa, you've written before this, correct?
I did, but my writing was never really about suicide to begin with. But then once you lose someone by it, it's kind of like all you want to write about.
What happened?
Because I lost my cousin by suicide in 2015.
Oh, sorry.
And yeah, it hurt. I'm getting over it. It just takes every day is some of them are good, some of them are bad. I'm pretty much over the fact that he's gone. I know I'm not going to see him until I'm in heaven. But it's as soon as I'm over that, I get another tragic death. Last year, May 1st, 19 days before my birthday, my ex's mother calls me up and tells me that John's been hit. John was my best friend since middle school and my boyfriend, off and on for years.
Yeah.
He got hit by a car and then a motorcycle,
Oh.
just crossing Route 9, trying to get home. And when she told me this, I didn't want her to say he was dead. I wanted her to tell me he was going to be all right. She told me he was gone, and it hurt so much.
Oh, Theresa, I'm so sorry. So where did "made a horrible mistake" come from?
That came from me wanting to get out the suicidal thoughts that were starting to build in my head. It's not even the loss at this point. It's the fact that the losses that are affecting me are all tragic. Like, I mean, I can understand my grandmother. She was like 83
Right.
when she passed during COVID. I can understand that. She had a long life, but 21, 39, I can't remember how old my one math teacher was that took his life. But I mean, it's just around you everywhere. It's fine if you're not looking to hear about it because you could just go on with your daily life. But when you hear about it on a daily basis, it makes you want to do something to like help others.
Yeah.
And that's what this book is all about. It's not about losing hope. It's about gaining hope. And it's about spreading the word, calling attention.
What do you tell us in your book? What do you talk about?
So the first couple pages are about my experience and what made me want to write this book. And then it just goes straight into the fictional story that I created. And it's a tale of a girl who wanted to give up on herself, but out of some circumstances beyond her beliefs, caused her to stay. Like it starts off kind of like, oh my God, is this going to end in tragedy? And then just slowly turns into like a story of hope for anyone who's been out there and anyone who's struggling.
Your main character, Josephine, has had several traumatic events happen in her life, right? She lost her sister to cancer.
Her boyfriend broke up with her because he couldn't deal with her depression. It was bringing him down. And it's like one thing after another. And something just one day caused her to want to take her life. And she spent like a month or so planning it out. She had everything that she needed done, even including the note. And she fell asleep waiting for her brother to go to bed. I don't want to give out too much because that's when it starts to get interesting.
Okay.
But that's kind of where it goes towards.
And this is a story of hope.
Yes, 100%.
How so?
Well, the end of the book, the last page or two, has information on websites, call and text numbers for suicide prevention. And I put that back there for a reason. I want someone who buys my book to see those numbers or the websites and be able to like say, I want to reach out for hope. I want to reach out for help. I want to live.
Now, were you sharing this story as you were writing it?
Yes, every chance I get. Every chance I get. My mom's friend who used to be my babysitter when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
She's an aide with my mom. And I guess my mom must have told her about my book and she wanted to buy it. She bought it and she told my mom what inspired her for it. And she was like, what I basically told you, between losing my cousin and starting to go through what he might have gone through in his last days with myself is what pushed me to make this book. That and the fact that I'm so sick and tired of suicide being a stigma. I want to live in a world where I can walk up to my friend or a family member and say, "Hey, I'm having thoughts of suicide. I'm not okay."
I don't think that's asking too much, Theresa. You're not alone. And that's a powerful message that you're sending with this book.
Yeah.
Where do you go from here?
Well, I have other books that are in the same similar genre, including a follow-up to this book.
Good.
But
Okay.
honestly, if I release them, it's going to be when I'm in a better state of mind
Okay.
and can afford to.
There's stuff going on, like there's walks for suicide prevention.
Yes. My family actually does a walk in Harvey Cedars, Maryland every year for my cousin and, well, honestly, now me.
Yeah. Is that a place where you could let people know about your book?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what I was thinking of doing when we do the walk this year? I was thinking about purchasing 3 of my books, signing them, leaving like a little message inside, and then just leaving it at the booth and telling the people from Americans for Suicide Prevention to give it away to someone who they feel might really need it.
And they have these walks all over the place. That could be something that you do.
Yeah.
Just go from one event to the other.
It's funny you said that. The last mental hospital that I got out of,
Okay.
I left one of my books with their hospital. So I mean, I hope I don't go into the hospital again, but if I ever do, I've been advertising in whatever place they send me to, like leaving like a piece of paper with my book's name and mine, just like in like random places for people to find.
Yeah. Do you think this book is good to help families understand what you go through?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
It might be a bit rough in the beginning, but like I said, once you go through the whole book, you'll end up realizing that it's not a story of tragedy, that it genuinely is a story of hope. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Deconstructing Stigma, but I did an interview with them for their national campaign a couple years back.
Great. Reach out to them. I wrote a book.
Okay.
And maybe some of the funds can go towards suicide prevention.
Yeah, that's actually for my website for the book. I asked if they could put a little donation QR code for Americans for Suicide Prevention, and ask people that want to donate. They can, even if it's as low as $1, anything matters. If they're only able to put $1 in, put $1 towards it, because it's going to save someone's life.
Theresa, that's wonderful. Theresa Foley made a horrible mistake. Thank you. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'd love to talk with you guys again.
J.R. Collins owns a sawmill in northeast Georgia and writes books. The Legend of Swell Branch, A Wilderness Adventure, is the first in the Long Hunter series, a work of historical fiction that takes place in the aftermath of the Civil War.
I grew up in an area here it's called Choistoy. It's the Choistoy Valley. It's an old Cherokee Indian word which means land where the rabbits dance.
Okay.
And it's a rich area in heritage. The Indians were here up until the forced removal. Even then, after that, they were here. And I really like writing books about the Southern Appalachia and how it was settled and the people who came there that happened to be my ancestors. And so through that, I have gained a real interest in that time period. My first 3 books, they're a series also. and they take place in the first part of the 19th century. My main character was born in 1815 in those books. That's The Boy Who Danced with Rabbits in that series. And they did really well. I've won awards for that series. They've done really well. But this book is on towards the end of the 19th century, post-Civil War, and it brings into sight the lives of those who lived there after the war.
So your main character is Buak Whalen?
Yes, ma'am, Buak Whalen.
And is he based on anybody in particular?
Just the Irish as a whole.
Okay.
Irish men as a whole. It's my ancestry as well. So I kind of just use him as a metaphor, if you will, for the Irish men of that time.
And he befriended the Indians that lived in that area.
Yeah.
And he becomes the white warrior lone eagle.
Yes, ma'am. After the forced removal, there were still Cherokee in the mountains, and they went deeper into the mountains up to where Cherokee is now. And they survived. And that pool of Indians that survived became the Eastern Band as we know it today. And so, regardless of what history says, all the Indians were not removed. And then once the war came along, everybody kind of forgot about the Indians, and so they were able to kind of form another society. And they're even trying to get a powwow to come to this area now to kind of bring the Cherokee back. But the Cherokee were big here in this area, so it was real interesting to be able to include them in this book and make him a part of it to kind of show the life of the Cherokee as well.
So what happens?
Mr. Buak was a young man prior to the Civil War, and he matured through the war, came to manhood, in post-Civil War years during the Reconstruction era. He is a man who loves his neighbors, who cares about his community. He's willing to stand up and fight for the wrongs that his fellow neighbors, his fellow settlers had to endure. At the end of the war, there was a horde of investors that just flowed south. We know them as carpetbaggers and whatnot, but in that mix was a lot of people who came south looking to make a better life for themselves. They brought their money. Unfortunately, there were a lot who came with bad intentions and maybe with the idea that they were going to take advantage of a defeated country, maybe claim spoils of war, if you will. Buak just is a man who wasn't going to tolerate that. He was trained by the Indians to be a good person and do right and wrong. His dad taught him that, and he took it on himself to make wrongs right. And he became a hero of sorts. And I kind of raised him up out of the ashes of the war to show people that the South was still there. We were defeated. The South was defeated. The Confederate States of America were no more. And here is Buak, who has lived through that, and he now stands up for those people that he lived with through all that. And it kind of helps me tell the story by having someone who is the main focus and who fights for his fellow man, which is something that's missing in today's society. Which brings me to the reasons why I wrote these books.
Okay.
Not only this book, but my first series of books. I live in a heritage-rich area, and this day and time, children are disconnected from their heritage, whether it be a broken home or families traveling from where their home places were, whatever. Children are disconnected from their heritage, and I believe that children need to understand who they are, and the best way for them to do that is to understand where they came from. And so as a child, I grew up here in this rich heritage, and I absorbed it. I just soaked it in. I watched all these old timers, and I watched how they lived their lives and how they acted and how they treated people and how they respected each other and how they respected their fellow man. And I watched, as I grew older, I watched that disappear. And it really bothers me that people can't treat people right. And so I wanted my children to understand that their ancestors didn't act like that. People in this society of settlers to the Southern Appalachian were dependent on each other. And it mattered how you lived your life. And I want my children to understand that It matters how you live your life now. And so I felt like I could communicate that to them better if I wrote a story that would be interesting to them, because they're highly distracted by the technical aspects of our society now. And it's hard to sit and have a long conversation with my children. So I wrote these books to help my children understand their heritage. And one of the interesting things about my books is this: if you or your ancestors or any part of your family claim heritage through the founding of our country, through the American Revolution, this book and my writings are about your people too. And when people read my books, they say, my family lived through this just like yours did. They'll say, I don't have that attitude towards my neighbor like Buwak has. I need to be a better person that way. And when I get that kind of feedback as an author, it just really lights up my life. I mean, that's my reward for writing books, is hoping people will understand that before now there was a society where people cared about other people, and we're getting away from that. And that bothers me.
Well, yeah, we're a very divided people. And regardless of what your politics are, we're still people. We're still neighbors. We still belong to a community.
Yes, ma'am.
And that seems lost.
As I say in my books, people are forgetting, and it's not right. They don't need to forget. They need to remember how this country was founded and what it took, and be proud of that heritage. No matter who you are, your folks were immigrants, and they came here from other countries, and we settled this country to be free Americans. And it's become so divided now that it's almost like you're American or un-American. We've got to realize at some point that America matters, and this is how America was founded. These people founded America, and I want people to read my stories and say, "Wow, I didn't know about this." And I love picking times when we don't talk about it a lot. I mean, we all know about the Civil War. We've all studied about the Civil War, but what happened afterwards? Outside of the slavery issues and all that, what happened to the people? And we're having to live this life where, the South lost some 400,000 or 500,000 men. That left many, many, many homesteads without protection, without people to grow food. I mean, we've all seen Coal Mountain, Gone with the Wind. It's that situation, and the South had suffered terrible losses in the war, and there were no men to keep these farms up. So these people coming south, many with good intentions, many with hopes of building a better life, but there were many who came to take.
Yeah.
They had a chip on their shoulder about the South, and they were coming with the idea that they were going to obtain spoils of war. And they were met with resistance, and Buwak was part of that resistance. And it's a real good story about how the South was able to stand up and fight back, even though they were suffering and it was a hard time for them. But the people of the Southern Appalachian stood together and fought together, and they survived, just as the Cherokee did.
You're so passionate. Tell me you go out and talk about this.
I do. I'll just give people books so I can open up the dialogue. I don't, I'm not about the money. I just want people to read my books and understand we can be a better people. We need to treat each other better. People will call me on the phone. Did you write this book? Yes, sir, I did. And he goes, I just wanted you to know you changed my life.
How are people finding out about your book?
In my first series of books, I used the local paper, started locally and started selling a lot of copies locally. And people loved the book so much that they started telling family members about them. We're a tourist area. I was putting them in all the stores for 2 years. I bought 100 copies and put them out so people could read it.
So you self-published it and then decided to publish it with Fulton?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Why did you do that?
For marketing.
Oh, okay. So now the marketing goes to the next level.
I want to go nationally, and I can't go nationally at this level.
Okay.
So what I understand Fulton is a nice platform for marketing. And so when I'm done with this, hopefully I'll have a nice platform to market from. But my books are loved by people. When they read them, they buy the next one and then buy the next one. I had a lady come into the store up here. It's a little touristy store. And the guy called me and said, Joe, I just had a lady come in here and it started raining. She was there for 4 days and it started raining. And she didn't have anything to do, and she loved to read. She was a prolific reader, and she'd read all her books already. So she came down to the store and asked the owner, Jason, said, you have any good books here? I see you carry books. And he said, yeah, you need to try this author. He's local. And so she said, well, show me the book. And she said, I'll know within the first 10 lines whether I'm going to read it. And so he stood there with her, and she read it. And she goes, yeah, I'll take it. So she came back the next day, and she said, is there another book in this series? She said, I couldn't put it down. I read it all. I've read it already. And he said, yeah, there's another one. And so she took it. And it was a couple of days before she came back and got the third one. And she said, who is this writer? And Jason said, well, it's just a local guy down the street. And she said, why is he not on the New York Times best-sellings list? He said, we're just a small town area, and nobody knows about us. But every time somebody bought my first book, they bought the next two. And I won awards out at Bellingham, Washington. I won awards through Chanticleer Reviews out there. I got an online book review on this book, and the man who did the review, he said it was the most unique work of historical fiction he had ever read.
That's great.
I have a website and read some of the reviews. It's jrcollinsauthor.com.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I enjoy writing. It gives me peace to take myself away and go to the scene that I'm writing, and I enjoy that. And I hope people when they read my books, I hope it takes them to the scene. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I get that a lot from readers. When I was reading your book, I was there.
Yeah. J.R. Collins, The Legend of Swell Branch, A Wilderness Adventure, the Long Hunter series. Thanks for talking with me today.
Thank you very much, and you're welcome.
Talk about inspiration. Hugh A. Samuels pays a beautiful tribute to one of the most important people in his life. The name of his book, My Grandma and Me. You've been writing for many years, haven't you?
I started as a child. I mean, I started around 1977 because there was a poet, a musician named Gil Scott-Heron, and I used to listen to his music, and he used to recite poetry between his songs, and that's when I really started writing. I've written a couple of poetry books, and I enjoy writing poetry. So I write poetry.
Did you get your poetry books published?
Yeah, they were published a long time ago, maybe 2007 or so.
And this isn't a poem. This is a story.
Well, yeah. This book is a tribute to my grandmother because when I was, my mother came to New York and my mother came to New York to take care of her children. I have a brother and sister. So she came to New York. She worked as a maid and a dietitian in New York and from Jamaica. And she left us there, and my grandmother took care of us until we actually was able to come up to New York. And my mother left when I was 2 years old, and when I was 7, I left Jamaica. So she took care of me for about 5 years. So I really don't know what she said to my grandmother, but I didn't even know that my grandmother wasn't my mother because I was 2 years old. So
yeah.
My grandmother was basically taking care of me nonstop. Like we were basically inseparable. She worked, but whenever she came home, she would always bring me something from work, And we had a lot of children in the house. We had like 13 children in the house because I lived with my aunt. My aunt had 10 children, and with me, my brother, my sister, so there was 13 children in the house.
Wow.
And they would get jealous whenever my grandmother would bring me stuff home from work, and she just took care of me. We were inseparable, we were like, just cling to her, and she taught me everything, and, I just like followed her around, and she just took care of me. We became really close, so that's the reason why. I mean, I could still feel her with me, even now, she's always in my mind, and she's always part of me. And she's been that way my whole life. So, that's the reason I wrote the book. Most of the books, even the poetry books, I dedicated to her and my mother, because I had a great relationship with my mother as well.
Has your grandmother passed?
Yes, she passed a long time ago, but I got to see her. I actually went back to Jamaica in the 80s. It was a long time ago. I went back and I saw her. She was, at that time, she like had dementia, and but I did see her before she passed, and I went and saw her and spoke to her, and then she realized it was me, and she was talking to me for like a few minutes, and then she faded back out. But I spent, that was very important to me to go back and see her, which I got the opportunity to do that. And it was very satisfying, to be able to be with her, talk to her, again, because I didn't get an opportunity between when I left and that moment to actually go back to Jamaica.
What made you decide to write this book now?
Well, the book was already written a long time ago, but the thing is, I was having some issues with I was really skeptical because of the people that I was dealing with before with the poetry books. The way that they wrote the contracts and stuff, it kind of, didn't benefit me. So I wanted to find somebody that was able to do it right and I get compensated the right way. So I thought Fulton was the one to do that, and that's the reason why I did it. But it was already, that book has been written for many years. I just didn't have an opportunity to find a publisher that I felt comfortable with.
So how was your experience with Fulton different?
Well, the self-publishers, they were more basically focused on the way the contract was written and the way that they did it. It was basically focused on themselves. It was written for a period of time, and when the time ran out, they had full control of everything. So I didn't benefit from it that way. So that was a bad experience. And then Fulton, they laid everything out for me and told me, what percentage I get and so forth and so on. So I felt more comfortable in going ahead and publishing with them.
Do people in your family know you wrote this book?
Yes. Yeah, they do know I wrote this book. They know I wrote the book. They know I write all the time. So they know that I wrote the book because I discussed it with them. I had to ask them, could I put their names in the book, which I changed the names because they weren't comfortable with their actual names in the book. So I changed the names from their names to character names.
What are some of the fondest memories you have with your grandmother?
Well, there's a part in the book. Initially, when the book opens up, it shows me and my grandmother sitting on the porch. We call it the veranda, on the porch in front of the house. And I'm basically sitting with her and reading the book. And that's something that we did continually, like on a regular basis. We would sit on the front of the house and just me and her at night. And we would look up into the sky, I'd be like sitting in her arms and we'd look up in the sky and we would talk and we talk about the clouds and what shapes they are and things like that. So that was a very poignant moment in the book because that's something that we did on a regular basis. We did it almost every night. We would sit on, just look up in the sky, talk about life, talk about, future, things like that. So that's one significant moment. Another significant moment was when I left Jamaica. She came to the airport with me and, she basically told me she would always be with me whether I'm with her or not. So, there's a part in the book where they show us at the airport and she's holding me and I'm crying and, I'm telling her, will I ever see her again? And she tells me, yes, you'll see me again, which I did. She said, yes, you'll see me again. So we're both crying, and she's basically sending me off to my mother, So that's another poignant moment.
Oh.
You can accomplish your dreams, regardless of wherever you come from. Because I come from meager means, I come from Jamaica. Jamaica is a place where when I left, even now, there's not a lot of wealth in Jamaica. So I come from a place where, you don't have a lot, right? But in the book, he goes to Jamaica. He keeps his mind focused on his the lessons that his grandmother taught him, and he ends up becoming a doctor. he also, when he becomes a doctor, he's helping elderly people. So he's basically taking what his grandmother gave him and he's giving it back to the person who basically formed his personality, and made him who he is. So he's basically going back and metaphorically repaying his grandmother by taking care of elderly people. He could have been any kind of doctor, but he chose to focus on elderly people. And that's what, that's the message, is like, you can basically come from meager means, but you can do whatever you want as long as you have somebody that's, inspires you to do something, and you focus on that, you can actually do whatever you want in life.
That's a great message, especially for kids.
Yeah, that's the message. Barnes & Noble has a story time that they do, but you have to kind of sign up for it.
Okay.
There are other things in here in Connecticut that you can actually read to children and things like that.
That's great. You're going to keep writing?
Yes, I am. I'm actually, I'm in the process of republishing one of the poetry books that I did. I am going to do some writing about some fictional writing that I've written some stories, but I haven't completed them. So I wrote a script about leaving Jamaica and coming to America and being in the military and all this kind of stuff. So I wrote a script that I'm trying to get made into a movie.
That's timely.
And the script is completed. So it's just a matter of finding someone to produce it. And when you try to produce a movie, you have to have representation. So I'm trying to secure some representation so I don't go out. A lot of people, they won't talk to you unless you have representation and you're trying to do a movie. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I have some other fictional writing that I want to do too, science fiction type stuff.
All right. You're going to be a busy guy.
Yeah, I am. It's going to take a little time, but like I said, some of the script stories are already half written. I just have to complete it. I also wrote a play that I need to finish, about angels and, people that protect you. Because I realized from, my life experiences that you do have angels around you all the time. You have a lot of people that help you. You don't even know why they help you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I want to write a play, a physical play where they're like on stage and, they're telling this story about angels that come around you, and, help you throughout life.
We all have them. Sometimes we don't know they're there.
Yeah, we don't. We don't even realize that they're there and why they're helping you. And, you don't know where they come from, but they're there.
Yeah. All right. Hugh A. Samuels, author of My Grandma and Me. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Alice.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.